and welcome to Telesur. This is from the south, from Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Let's begin. With days to go until the second round of votes in Brazil, far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro has promised to exile or imprison his opponents if they do not submit to the law. In a speech to supporters, the former army captain said that if elected, he will use the armed forces to combat any violence which may follow his election. He said he would seek permission for this from Congress. He also said he will use the army for street patrols and described the country as being at war.
If this bunch want to stay here, they'll have to submit to our law. Otherwise, they'll have to leave or go to prison. These low-life Reds will be banished from our country.
The president of the Workers' Party, Gleisi Hoffmann, says Brazil is facing a violent electoral process.
We want to talk about the seriousness of the situation, how serious the speech made yesterday in Paulista Avenue by candidate Jair Bolsonaro was. We have just given a press conference and we are asking for an audience with the OAS Commission that is accompanying the election to make an international report. We may be entering the extremely violent process in the election. What Bolsonaro did yesterday was to incite violence.
Different evangelical groups have created movements against the far-right candidate. They have thrown their support to the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad. Reportedly, this was in reaction to statements made by some evangelical leaders who said people who truly believe in God should vote for Bolsonaro. However, for these movements, Bolsonaro represents violence and they see him as the opposite of what the Bible teaches. Former candidate Marina Silva has also expressed her support to Haddad. The Ecologist Party leader says she has made the decision to defend the rights of the indigenous peoples and Brazilian minorities. Marina Silva got 1% of the votes in the first round of elections on October 7th. Environmental analysts have also spoken out about Bolsonaro's economic policy. They say it is an ancient vision that sees the environment as an obstacle.
It represents a vision of the environment of maybe 50, 100 years ago, or even before that, of the 29th century. As those, we had to conquer the territory, instead of looking at the environment as an asset. Our biodiversity can generate multiple forms of wealth.
For his part, Haddad has been campaigning in the state of Maranhão. His supporters are calling for the defense of democracy and the recovery of the economy. Haddad told them there's still time to defeat the far-right campaign. The latest polls puts Haddad just 6 points behind Bolsonaro, or at 47% against 53% for the far-right candidate. The election will be held this Sunday. Let's go to our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, who is following Haddad's campaigns and brings us the latest details about his recent visit to a recycling plant.
Here in Sao Paulo, garbage processing is an enormous task. So the Comare collective transforms garbage into recycled materials. Fernando Haddad has come to visit this plant to support the work of these people and also to announce a 20% increase in subsidies for low-income families. He also announced a limit on the increase of the price of gas. This event is taking place after demonstrations in support of Jair Bolsonaro, which happened on Sunday in Paulista Avenue. It's worth mentioning that in a recent video, Jair Bolsonaro said that if he wins the presidency, he will sweep away the left wing. Various social movements have continued to reject Bolsonaro's candidacy and have stated that a meeting like today's with Haddad will not be able to happen if the far-right candidate were to win. That is why they say Sunday's vote is crucial. Another video surfaced this weekend, this time of Jair Bolsonaro's son, lawmaker Eduardo Bolsonaro, where he warns a possible shutdown of Brazil's Supreme Electoral Court and possibly imprisoning the court's judges.
Moving on to Mexico, where one person traveling with the migrant caravan has died. According to the public prosecutor, the man in his 20s died after falling from a truck. The vehicle was heading towards the city of Huixla in Chiapas, Mexico. This young man was traveling along with the thousands of migrants heading to the United States. Reportedly, there are 3,000 migrants in this group. Another group of thousands more is still trying to cross the border between Mexico and Guatemala. Many migrants have crossed by the river to avoid Mexican authorities. And authorities in Chiapas say that over the past 3 days, over 1,000 asylum seekers have been processed at the border. Over 300 of the migrants have been relocated to federal shelters after being considered especially vulnerable. Authorities have said the government's main goal is to protect migrants' rights. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Eduardo Martinez, has more.
I'm in a fairground that the Mexican government turned into a shelter, but some migrants have said they haven't been able to communicate with their family members that were moved to these facilities. Social activists visited the shelters. They say there are over 1,000 people in there who cannot communicate with their loved ones and are not allowed to leave their premises. Activists have accused the government of making this shelter a migrant center, popularly known as migrant jails.
Eduardo Martinez from Mexico. U.S. President Donald Trump has said once again his government will begin to cut aid to Central American countries for failing to stop the caravan. He also made claims that criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in with the migrants and that this was a national emergency. Those making up the caravan have responded to Trump's claims.
The only thing we're looking for is for an opportunity to reach the US, to be able to work. Most people here are poor. If we had the economic means to enter the US legally, then we wouldn't make this huge sacrifice, suffering the terrible heat. You saw what happened yesterday. People fainted from the heat.
Trump's tweet is very worrying. He doesn't know what we've suffered, as he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Well, we didn't. If he put himself in our shoes, it would be very different. If he walked what we walk, he never walks.
A UN spokesman has confirmed that over 7,000 people have joined the caravan. Farhan Kwak said that these were figures from the International Organization for Migration.
Large numbers of people are arriving in Mexico today and are likely to remain in the country for an extended period. And at this time, it is estimated that the caravan comprises some 7,233 persons, many of whom intend to continue the march north.
And let's take a deeper look at the migrant caravan and their journey in this report.
From very early in the morning, thousands of migrants left the bordering city of Hidalgo. Step by step, they made the over 7-hour trek towards Tapachula, Chiapas.
We want them to support us, to support our children, women and men, to give us security and protection, because we left Honduras without anything.
With punishing 30-degree heat bearing down on them, they battled exhaustion, hunger, and blistered feet. But they refused to stop. The caravan pushes on to the promised land as they walked along Federal Road 200.
I'm making the journey so that I can have a better life, because there we can no longer live and survive there. The government does not help us. People are starving in Honduras, and the president does not help us at all.
Mexico's government closed the border bridge, but the people of Mexico stood in solidarity with the migrants and their cause, and lent them assistance.
We all need help, and maybe we also have to migrate to another country at some point. So this is why we must also help others.
We ask the authorities to open the way for these people to cross because they are here in desperate need of help.
As they continued the 40-meter trek, migrants only stopped once. Federal police tried to persuade them to get into buses that, according to the commissioner, will take them to shelters.
It's a big shelter. There are doctors, water, baths, we have assured them.
However, among the more than 5,000 Central American migrants, many mistrust and fear to be deported. People from the migrant caravan say they will only rest if absolutely necessary. They hope to arrive to the capital in less than 15 days.
We have more stories coming up, but meanwhile you can follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account at Carla G. Telesur. So give us a follow. We'll be back. Welcome back. Mine workers in Peru have started an open-ended strike demanding salary increases. 1,000 workers from the Chinese minery company Shugang have stopped working. Labor leaders say the company refuses to raise wages even though it has increased benefits. Workers also say their employer must committed labor violations by replacing protesting employees with temporary workers. Still in Peru, President Martín Vizcarra has rejected the law that could allow former President Alberto Fujimori to be on house arrest.
The government of Peru has rejected the humanitarian law which would effectively allow elderly prisoners to comply with house arrest sentences. Now the law has returned to Congress to be modified. In the meantime, the former president will have to return to prison after his pardon was overturned.
The judiciary system and the government need to deeply analyze this law, so prisoners cannot use this to be released. This could represent a threat to society. This needs to be discussed and analyzed.
According to a letter sent by President Martin Vizcarra to Congress, this law could benefit the former president directly as he was sentenced for human rights violations. Vizcarra says any proposal of this law would also be an attack on the independence of the judiciary. But Fujimori's supporters responded to these claims.
The law will return to the Commission of Justice, and the people in favor and against the law will be debated. Democracy will prevail because the judiciary system needs to be changed, and some amendments of this law will change too.
For the relatives of the victims of Fujimori's administration, the measure taken by the president does not guarantee anything. This is because Congress could vote to pass the law.
The National Congress could pass the law because the popular force has a majority. They can do whatever they want, but we're going to keep fighting until the end. We have been fighting for 6 years, and we're not going to give up now. It's not fair what they are doing to us.
If the National Congress passes this law, Fujimori, his former counselor, Vladimiro Montesinos, paramilitary members that executed hundreds of people, would be released.
Students in Costa Rica are lending their support to the general strike, which is now entering its 7th week. Young students are also demanding that they be exempted from the university entrance examination. They say classes have been affected by the nationwide strike, so they have not been able to prepare for any academic evaluation. Costa Rica has been under an open-ended strike as workers reject the tax reform passed by the government.
What we want is for this test to instead become training and summative, as the ministry wants to remove from next year, because there are reasons necessary to do it.
We are here to remove the high school test for this year and to give all students the third quarter of the 7th to 10th in academic colleges and 7th to 5th in technical colleges.
Now to Ecuador, where former Vice President Jorge Glass has started a hunger strike after being moved to a new prison. Glass lawyer Eduardo Franco Loor has confirmed the strike on Twitter. Glass was sentenced to 6 years in prison for allegedly receiving illicit payments from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Earlier, his lawyer had condemned the conditions in which the former vice president is being held.
We are making the authorities responsible for the life and well-being of Jorge Glass. He is not in good health, and now his rights are being violated, mainly his right for mediation in front of a judge. Glass has requested the annulment of his sentence given his innocence. We are condemning this violation of his human rights and sending complaints to the UN and the IACHR.
We continue in Ecuador. A trans woman was reportedly tortured and murdered in the province of Cotopaxi. According to trans activists, the woman was attacked by 5 people who threw stones at her. She eventually died from the injuries. Transgender rights organizations are demanding that the government of Lenín Moreno find the killers and guarantee the safety of the members of the LGBTI community. Now to Colombia, where almost 800 organizations and social leaders have asked Pope Francis to talk to Iván Duque and resume the peace talks. In a letter, they asked the Pope to support the peace dialogue. Activists also said the government, the church, and the United Nations had to examine the process 70 days ago, but it hasn't happened yet. And Pope Francis met with Colombian President Iván Duque at the Vatican. They discussed the reintegration of FARC members into society, the peace dialogue with the ELN, and the Church's contribution to the peace process. They also addressed ways of protecting social leaders in Colombia. October 22nd in Argentina marks 41 years of unceasing efforts by the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo to find their missing family members. These women have been relentless in their struggle to find more than 500 grandchildren who were taken away during the military dictatorship. Over 4 decades of searching and 128 granddaughters and grandsons have been identified. Hundreds of citizens in Mexico are dressing up as La Catrina, or the Elegant Skull, and marching through the streets of Mexico City. This in preparing for the Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead.
The day when the dead roam the streets is getting closer. It's one of the most famous holidays in the Mexican calendar. The Day of the Dead is celebrated towards the end of October and the beginning of November.
This celebration is quite colorful. It reminds you of your roots and makes you think of the path ahead. Life is short and it needs to be enjoyed to the fullest.
Like many others across the country, Jose Barreto takes advantage of the holiday to show his creative side. Dressing up as a Catrina, a term coined by the famous Mexican printmaker Jose Guadalupe Posada to describe what he called the elegant death.
We dress up as a Catrina to embody some extravagance to call attention to ourselves.
Anthropologists say that death has been celebrated for over 1,000 years before the Spanish conquest. On the Day of the Dead, traditions are being upheld and celebrated by Mexicans since childhood.
We celebrated this day. Since I was a kid, I remember always paying homage to the dead.
The aim of this celebration is to provide an alternative perspective on one of life's most difficult subjects, death.
We try to see death in a more cheerful way, not as a tragedy, but as another step in the cycle of life, as a new stage that can be joyful and colorful.
Besides dressing up, colorful altars with floral arrangements are made. This is the way Mexicans celebrate their love of life and death.
We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. We'll be back after this video. And we're back. North and South Korea have agreed to remove guns and guard posts from Panmunjom, the town that straddles their border. The decision is aimed at reducing tensions between the two nations. Earlier this month, troops from both sides removed about 800,000 landmines buried along the border. A vehicle that could belong to the Saudi consulate has been found in a garage park in Istanbul. Turkish police said the abandoned car was found in the suburbs and seems to include a diplomatic number plate. Meanwhile, Saudi officials have acknowledged the use of a Saudi twofold to cover up the crime, which authorities continue to investigate the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi after he went inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd. Cameroon has re-elected Paul Biya as president for a 7th presidential term. Biya has ruled the country since 1982. Violence in the polls increased after allegations of widespread fraud. Biya is the second African leader who has been in power for the longest, after Equatorial Guinea President Teodoro Obiang.
I hereby proclaim that the following candidate, who will be President of the Republic, and also the candidate who received the majority of the vote, is the candidate Biya Paul.
An official from South Africa's African National Congress has been killed in Cape Town. A police report said Luyanda Mbele, a counselor, and his cousin were shot by unknown assailants on Sunday night. More than 100 ANC officials and members have been killed in the last 2 years. The Zambian government has revived plans to kill up to 2,000 hippos in the next 5 years. The government suspended the plans in 2016 after protests by animal rights activists. But authorities say the plan will continue since the hippo population cannot be supported by the water levels in the Luangwa River. They say moving them elsewhere will be too costly. LGBTI activists in the United States have protested against the administration of Donald Trump for trying to remove trans people from official recognition. They gather outside the White House to denounce the news that Trump is to narrowly define gender. Once the gender of a child has been registered at birth as either male or female, it won't be able to be changed. The Department of Health and Human Services has declined to comment on this. Young Palestinians are training to fulfill their dreams of participating in the swimming team at the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan. 30 young men and women practice off the sea of the Gaza Strip 3 times a week. Despite lacking free swimming pools, swimsuits, and goggles due to the Israeli blockade, they venture into one of the world's most populated coastlines. More than 95% of tap water is polluted, and diseases related to water are the primary cause of child mortality in Gaza, according to the World Health Organization. But despite this, they continue with their dreams. Armenia's capital, Yerevan, has celebrated its 2,800th birthday. Over the weekend, residents rejoiced over the birthday of their city, celebrating with traditional Armenian dance and music. Founded in the 8th century before Christ, Yerevan was originally called Erebuni and is one of the oldest capitals in the world. And with that show of dance, we've come to the end of this news brief. For this and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all our latest information, so go check it out. And we're also on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and until the next time, thank you for watching Telesur, connecting the Global South.